Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me to this, discussion. I think it is a very, very important discussion. Just to repeat some of the things that have already been said, the United Nations was formed in the hope that countries and nations will employ negotiated settlements rather than go to war and use violent methods to settle disputes. The horrific effects of the nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki shocked the world into action. It was established as a common global organization for all peoples of the world, and with the aim, and I'm just going to quote a few, there have been many quoted already, but from my perspective, there are 5 very important aims. Number 1 is to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. 2, to establish conditions for justice in the world. 3, to create respect for international law. 4, to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights. And number 5, to promote economic and social advancement of all peoples of the world. On the 75th anniversary, I think it is a good time to see how far these global aims have been achieved. Since the first use of the nuclear weapon in war 75 years ago, 19 countries or more have nuclear capability today. At that time, there were only 2 countries that had nuclear weapons. Today, there are 19 countries and maybe more who possess nuclear capability. The weapons today have 1,000 times greater potential power than the ones that were used 75 years ago. What does this say of the first aim of saving succeeding generations from the scourge of war? It is said by some authorities that their reasoning was based on a belief that, and I quote, security depends on accumulating more power than your enemies, while doing everything you can to limit their accumulation of such power. Sweden's Prime Minister Olof Palme pointed out the fallacy of such thinking, and he chaired a major United Nations commission in 1981 that presented an alternate. Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev studied the Palme Commission report, and in 1986, at a meeting with US President Ronald Reagan, a discussion began on a process of abolishing all nuclear weapons in the world. But 34 years since then, until today, the threat of these nuclear arsenals are still there. Nobody has dismantled them except South Africa and Kazakhstan. The idea that our safety lies in arming ourselves with even more superior weapons than others is no longer acceptable. In a world armed with nuclear weapons, it's a formula that holds potential for the deaths of billions of human beings and the destruction of human and natural worlds in the future. The idea of common security may seem vacuous against the cold brutality of nuclear weapons and their military and political champions. But when West Germany embodied the idea in policy in its relationship with the Soviet Union in the early 1980s, and when Mikhail Gorbachev then carried it to Rachville, it contributed directly to the end of the Cold War, to the partial nuclear disarmament of the two superpowers, and to the subsequent reuniting of East and West Germany into a single nation again. Not a shot was fired. This was done peacefully through negotiations. The work of freeing the world from the threat of nuclear war, nuclear winter, and world-scale destruction must fall now to the young people, the youth of today, young citizens who have taken up the cause of limiting global warming need to realize that nuclear war is an equal and more immediate threat to human and natural life. The present COVID-19 pandemic clearly indicates that the world is interconnected and common security is the answer to major issues facing the world today, such as global warming. Many leaders have spoken out about finding a new normal as life will never return to the old normal. We have to find a new way of thinking. We therefore need to look at how can humanity secure itself against the ill effects of climate change from threats of violence and natural disasters. Gandhian ideas cover every one of the aims of human rights, economic and social justice, international law, establishing conditions for a just society in every country, and the imperative of building a culture of nonviolence. Just consider if all that money that governments are spending on building nuclear capability and on maintaining nuclear capability, if that is diverted to building SDGs in every country will be prosperous. Every country will have the basic necessities of life. All the people in the world will be happier, have a better living conditions. Why would war be necessary if that happens? Consider that. For Gandhiji, non-violence was not just about the absence of violence, but the creation of a climate of love and caring, which spreads to the universe and all animate and inanimate objects. A caring person does not hoard or be self-centered or violent or hurtful or reckless and destructive. A caring person shows compassion, can understand the pain of others, and will do something to help change the situation. A caring person will try to ensure food security and shelter for all people, quality education and health care for all people, access to water and sanitation, and conditions of good health through the control of carbon emission. So while UN makes rules and creates organs to help countries and its people, This can only be successful if the people themselves are also prepared to make an effort. UN and India's envoys within the UN were instrumental in much of the help that we received from the international community to force apartheid South African government to come to the table to negotiate a peaceful settlement. Starting from the time Dr. Vijaya Lakshmi Pandit was at the UN, that's before India even got its independence. India proposed the isolation of South Africa because of its apartheid policies. We are indeed very grateful to all those efforts made to isolate apartheid South Africa, impose sanctions, and speak out against the apartheid oppression through the UN and other international fora, particularly championed by India. Finally, I urge civic society, all of us who are not within the government, not within the UN, throughout the world, as people of the world, to support the efforts that are being made right now by India and South Africa to urge WTO to slacken both price control and TRIPS agreement on COVID-19 treatment efforts so that all the people of the world will have access to quality drugs that may be produced in the future. So I urge every one of us to support this effort so that companies that want to patent these drugs and accumulate money from the suffering of the people will be stopped from doing this. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.